how can God be finite and then infinite at the same time?
Anything during your medical training that also pointed you towards the claims of Christ.
The video you're about to watch features two questions posed to the late Nabeel Qureshi. The first is by a Muslim, the second is by a medical doctor. They're both extremely important in terms of showing the differences between Christianity and Islam.
My main problem is with the Christian doctrine of Godhood of Jesus. So there's a couple of questions that are related. First of all, I find this concept logically fallacious. Like there are many aspects to its logical fallacy, as in maybe one of them could be that how can God be finite and then infinite at the same time? Like this is like it's like saying that there could exist a square circle. It's a logical fallacy, right? So when we say that Jesus was God or Son of God, we are actually saying that God existed in finitude during the life of Jesus, and He also is infinite at the same time. This is logically fallacious. Now, because you are you're coming from a historical standpoint.
Did you want me to respond to that, or are you having
it's a
something
relate.
else?
Like the same question continuing. So, because you're coming at it from a historical standpoint, another thing that adds, like the historical evidence that adds, that supports this argument, is that the concept of Trinity, the word Trinity itself, it doesn't appear as a theological term till near the end of the 2nd century after Jesus. So it was first used as trias by Theophilus, the bishop of Antioch, in AD 180. So we can, adding up to that, when you refer to Mark chapter 14, verse 62, which is what you say is the proof that Jesus claimed to be God, are you really applying the same criteria of objectivity that you were applying previously to the Quran when interpreting this as meaning that Jesus is claiming himself to be God? Because if you look at it completely objectively, looking at the entire text, there is nothing in the entire text that's saying that Jesus claimed to be God, and in fact the verse that you yourself quote is actually saying Son of Man. So I mean,
these are great questions. Don't go anywhere. What's your name?
Munzir.
Munzir, where are you from?
I'm from Pakistan.
Pakistan. बहुत खुशी हुई आपसे मिलके. I had the exact same questions when I was when I practiced Islam. What I want to point out is that first and foremost, what we have to see is what Jesus claimed for himself. Now, the secondary stuff that follows, the theological unfolding or unpacking of what he said, we can spend years and years debating what it means. But what did he say about himself? That's the first thing we want to look at. So, again, that's a historical perspective. Theologians argue all day long, back and forth, back and forth. You know, theologians argue all the time, and I just sit back and watch and smile because you can't really prove it one way or another. But when it comes to historical events, we can show with relative degrees of certainty, if the evidence is good, if the records are good, what the most likely conclusion is. So first, and let me give you an answer before, if you feel like interjecting, we can talk afterwards. First, I want to point out you are absolutely right. The term Trinity is not used till the end of the 2nd century. What is the doctrine of God called in the Quran? In Islam, what is the doctrine of God called?
Tawheed.
Tawheed. Is that in the Quran?
No,
the word Tawheed.
The word Tawheed is a derived word from Ahad.
Alhamdulillah, good. So you understand, the word Tawheed is not itself in the Quran. In the same way, the word Trinity is not itself in the Bible. This doesn't pose a problem. The Shahada is not found in the Quran. You have the components of the Shahada in the Quran, but you do not, you do not have La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah in that way found in the Quran. The components are found in the Quran. With the Trinity, the components are found in the Bible. So,
the word Tawheed does appear in the Hadith.
Oh, that's great, but it's not in the Quran.
Just narrations of the Prophet.
And the Hadith is much later. So we're looking at you asked for the Bible, and we have within the early canonical tradition, people calling God a Trinity in the early canonical tradition. In fact, much closer to Jesus' time than the Hadith were to Muhammad's time. So whichever way you stack it, when you're consistent, you end up with a stronger case for the Trinity, for Jesus' deity. Now I want to continue on to your next part of your question, which is Jesus finite or infinite? The argument is that Jesus is, actually I'm going to pose it in a slightly different way. Can Allah come onto this world if He wants? Can He be in this world if He wants?
I wouldn't think so.
You wouldn't think so.
Because
So Allah's omnipotence is limited. He can't come onto this world.
it's like basically Allah Ta'ala cannot do logically fallacious thing. Like He cannot create a square circle, right? Because that's something logically
But
fallacious.
how do
So
we
there
know
are
that's what
certain
this
things
is?
that Allah
But
cannot.
how do we know that's what this is? Because, for example, in Surah Al-Imran, when Allah is talking to Moses, it says in Surah Al-Imran, I think it's Surah Al-Imran, it might be Surah 18, but double check, that Allah, as He spoke to Moses, Allah was in the bush. Allah was in the bush. So if you want to say that meant something else, well, you're going to have to argue with the Quran on that one. It seems to be pretty clear that Allah can emanate His voice from a physical place. He can be in a physical place in a sense. In the same way, I don't believe that God coming to this earth limits His omnipotence. It's not a limitation of His omnipotence. Jesus has taken on flesh. God the Father is still everywhere. God, Jesus, the Son, is here on this earth. It's a limitation in that sense, but it's not a limitation of His nature. He is both the divine and human nature. That's the argument. Now, I want to talk about briefly, and then we're going to have to go to the next question, but let's talk afterwards for sure. You asked about the Son of Man. You said He's not calling Himself the Son of God, He's calling Himself the Son of Man. I'm emphasizing to you, my friend, when this hit me, again, while I was practicing Islam, when this hit me, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. The claim Son of God, according to Jews at that time, was not anything divine. Adam was called the Son of God. Solomon was called the Son of God. In the Psalms it says, you are gods. It's not a divine claim to call someone a son of God. But when someone refers to that Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, who's going to receive glory, authority, and sovereign power, and people of every nation and language are going to worship Him with the worship due only to God, that Son of Man is more than just a human. He is divine. He's going to be worshipped by all people of all time. So when Jesus calls Himself the Son of Man, it's not the Son of God title. And lots of Christians get this wrong, so I'm not pointing the finger at you. Lots of Christians say, oh, Son of Man means He's human, and Son of God means He's God. No, it's the other way around. In the Jewish context, Son of God was a normal human title. Son of Man, from Daniel 7, that was something divine. Go back and read Daniel chapter 7. See that this man is worshipped by all people from all eternity. This man, or one who looks like a human anyway, is worshipped by all people alongside of God the Father. That's the one Jesus is claiming to be. Definitely understand that point that I'm trying to make. And so when you see that Jesus' claim is found there in Mark 14:62, it's found in all the Gospels, and every time Jesus uses the term Son of Man, He's alluding to that. You cannot extract that from the Gospels. So please put Mark 14:62 next to Daniel chapter 7 and see what Jesus is claiming for Himself. And we'll talk afterwards for the rest.
Here is what it says specifically in Daniel chapter 7. Quote, He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and people of every language worshipped Him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and His kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Okay, now later in the same Q&A, Nabeel is asked a question by a medical doctor about evil, and his answer to this question, the story that he tells, is of a more personal nature, but it really exposes a huge difference between Christianity and Islam. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick 1-minute halftime break here from the conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. This is an email that I got from a subscriber of this YouTube channel. I've been hoping to find something like this for a while. One morning a few weeks ago, I prayed to God to send some help. A couple hours later, I heard an ad for this app. I immediately downloaded it. It has been everything I was looking for. Relay is a community-based app to help you on your porn-free journey. There's a lot of different features in Relay that make it effective. I want you to check it out for yourself in the link in the description below. It gives you daily accountability, evidence-based skills, and a supportive community that will enable you to break free from the porn cycle if you are currently caught in one. And like I said, the statistics around the amount of people that are frankly horrifying. So that's why I care about this. Relay is so confident, in fact, that you will see results in 30 days, that they will give you a money back guarantee if you don't. So there really is no downside to this in that sense if you are currently trapped in pornography and want to get out. If Relay works for you, amazing, absolutely worth it. If for whatever reason it doesn't, you don't lose any money. Don't keep this in the shadows anymore. Don't punt it to your future self to solve. Take a stand today. Let this be the day that things change for you. Click the link in the description. Use my code WISDOM to get 7 days free. Join Relay if you're struggling. Thank me later. Now back to the video.
I too am a medical doctor, so I really appreciated a lot of the aspects that you brought in from the medical standpoint.
Sure.
But just in your own personal journey through all of this, was there anything during your residency, anything during your medical training that also pointed you towards the I guess the claims of Christ? Any other personal anecdotes you can think of?
There are plenty of personal anecdotes. Thank you so much, Dr. France, asking the question. There are plenty of personal anecdotes. I find that on a stage like this, if you share the personal anecdotes, they get mixed up with the historical, logical argumentation, and so people start saying, oh, you believe that because of this personal anecdote, look how weak your beliefs are. And so generally speaking, I don't bring them up. But since we've distanced ourselves from that, when I was a third-year medical student, I was doing OB-GYN rotations, and we were at a high-risk facility in Norfolk, Virginia. And so we got the worst of the worst. My whole time, in my 2 months of OB-GYN rotations, I saw one family. Everyone else was single mothers or drug addicts or what have you. One night, a 15-year-old girl comes in labor. And it turns out she was not willing to have her baby. And so she had taken a significant amount of crack cocaine because she had heard that that would cause you to go into premature labor. And she did. The baby was born. And I'm sorry, this is difficult to remember. They had the baby being examined by the neonatologists, and just very small, very light, and breathing heavily, and obviously on the verge of death. And I asked what the situation was. I knew about the baby before I knew about the mother. And so I asked what the situation was. They told me. I went to see the mother, and I walked in the mother's room to ask her what had happened, because they didn't tell me all the details. And I walked in, and I saw her texting, and not a single care in the world, laughing, texting. And I asked her, what's going on? What are you concerned? Is this the right room? Is this the right baby? And she would not refer to the baby as her. She would refer to her as it. It was just something that didn't matter. Now, how does this play in? I was shocked that day, absolutely shocked at the level of apathy. In fact, I would say an anger welled up in me at the level of apathy towards this girl. And so I went and I started reading her H&P, I started reading her records, and when I found out her history, she had been abused as a child. Her family all did drugs. She didn't have a father in the picture. And I'm reading this and I say, who do I get angry at? Who am I supposed to be angry at here? Is it her? Is it the person who is supposed to be in her life and take care of her as a father? Is it the people who are supposed to protect her from? Who do I get angry at? And for the first time, I was just furious at the sin in the world. And yet, all of a sudden, I had this desire to care for this girl. Despite what she had done, despite the heinous crime that she had just committed, killing another human being in my perspective, I had this desire to care for her. And all of a sudden, it hit me. And I'm not a father yet, but it hit me that the love of a father goes beyond any sin. The love of a father who understands their child goes beyond any sin. I think about my father, who I call Abba. If I sin against Abba, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what I do. He would still love me. Now, the gospel message is that God is more loving than any human being we can imagine. If my father would forgive me no matter what, by definition, God has to be more loving than that. Now, in Islam, it's clear in the Quran, God does not love those who are unrighteous. This isn't something I'm making up. It's in the Quran. God does not love the sinners. And so, as you look through the Quran, you don't have unconditional love. You have love for those who perform. You have love for those who are good Muslims, but not unconditional love. And to me, that makes God less loving than a human, which I don't think is possible. And so, again, this is a personal anecdote. This is something that tied things together for me. The beauty of the gospel message is that God loves even those who sin because He understands. And that for me was powerful. Thank you so much for asking the question.
Thank you.
I don't know if you're watching this video as a Muslim or as a Christian or as an atheist. It really doesn't matter. The idea is this, and it's a tough pill to swallow no matter who you are, that as much as we hate the problem of evil, we are a part of it. You are a part of it. I am a part of it. This is why Jesus is relevant, because He says that all we, like sheep, have gone astray, that we are all dead in our sin, that we are all enemies of God, but yet Christ died for us. I love the way that Dr. Tim Keller puts this. He says, we are more flawed and sinful within ourselves than we ever dared believe, yet at the very same time, we're more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we ever dared hope. It's this idea of the ground being level at the foot of the cross. This is the unique message of Christianity, that you don't have to climb a ladder to get to God, that you don't get to God by religion or by good works, but you get to God by grace and by the work that has been done on the cross of Christ. This is the completely unique Christian message that, again, I think is widely misunderstood. If you guys want to hear more from Nabeel, I'm going to put a video here covering that, which also goes into, at the end, I tackle the historicity of the New Testament and the fact that Jesus existed in history, that the things that I've just described in this video are not just wishful thinking, they're not fantasy, they're history. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.